Well, the Chinese appear to be preparing to launch a first of its kind new generation fighter jet in 2021. This power projection and air attack capability for a country seeking to strengthen its global influence. Citing an aviation industry report, the Chinese backed Global Times stated that the new plane is likely to be a carrier launched fighter variant of its fifth generation J-31 stealth fighter jet. It has long been discussed that China may engineer a new carrier based variant of its J-31 jet in what might appear as a transparent attempt to rival America's F-35 fighter jets. Meanwhile, for the first time in 6 years, two US Navy aircraft carriers are in the South China Sea. This is the latest show of military might from Washington as it pushes back against China's sweeping claim to much of the contested region in the South China Sea. The two US carriers arrived in the region as China wrapped up its own set of naval exercises in that particular region. The Nimitz carrier strike force composed of the USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan and career strike groups conduct dual carrier operations in the South China Sea, and they have been doing that very regularly, mind you. It is the first time two US carriers have operated together in the South China Sea since 2014, mind you, and only the second time since 2001. So, what does this mean for the area at large? What does this mean for the world at large, and more specifically and more focusedly, what does it mean for India? We'll discuss this with our esteemed panelists on the broadcast. Joining me is Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. Sumit Peer, political analyst, also joins us on the program. Dr. Deepak Vora, former diplomat, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, is also here with us. Wing Commander A.R. Giri, former IAF, also joins us on the panel. And Sri Iyer, last not the least, with a very motivating background behind him, foreign policy analyst, also joins us on the program. Professor Nalapat, let me begin by asking you that tradition would have it, when there is a gun pointing at you, you are usually intimidated. When there is a gun pointing at you, you perhaps will do anything but dance. China doesn't seem to be in any such sort of a stress. What explains this intrepid behavior on behalf of China?
Well, Vineet, I am not sure that I agree with you that they're not under stress, because the Global Times editors may not be experts in warfare, and especially in the deadliness of a US carrier task force. But the reality is that if you talk about the F-35, for example, and other US aircraft like an F-22, well, even the F-18, the Chinese have nothing to even remotely compare with that. I mean, they've been helped a lot by their friends in Russia. There are a lot of Russians who are now active in the Chinese military complex, and a lot of Chinese are going to Russia to study what the Russians know and to go back and ultimately, of course, drive the Russians out of business by reverse engineering all their products. But the reality of the situation is the Americans have the cutting edge, and they will continue to have the cutting edge so long as the Chinese are behind in artificial intelligence, etc. And this, I can tell you, is where, as I said, Prime Minister Modi's strike on Chinese apps has come as a major worry for them. Because Mike Pompeo is talking about the US following, the Australians are talking about Australia following. If this kind of thing happens across the board, I can tell you a lot of these Chinese tech companies that were hugely profitable and are immensely big are going to start folding and folding and folding.
Folding and continue to fold. Shri, what's your analysis of what's going on at the South China Sea? We've spoken about it a number of times before. And obviously, the claims that China has been making, they have not only irked, the countries that in fact have similar claims in that part of the world, but the United States in a more particular way. A lot of trade is routed through that particular route, and the US is perhaps one of the primary beneficiaries.
Yes, and in fact, viewers can see an F-35 in the background. Now, information about J-31 first surfaced in November 2018 in Aviation Week. And if you look at the comparison between the J-31 and F-35, there are several things in which the J-31 is actually superior. For example, it is lighter, it has twin tanks, and the other one has only one tank, and therefore, because it has twin tanks and it is lighter, the range is almost double that of the F-35. Now, this has been going on for a while in terms of IP theft from China, by China, from the United States. And this article in Aviation Week flat out said that, they are looking amazingly similar. And this is like, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. So this was 2018. And now they are saying that in 2021, they are going to deploy it. I'm not surprised, but the question that is uppermost in my mind is that how good is their avionics? For example, will our viewers or will someone in this panel tell me what happened when the F-16/J-17 was brought down during the Balakot fracas? Was that an F-16 or was that a J-17? J-17 is supposed to be the ripoff of F-16. I don't know. Maybe one of you guys know about it, but that is where probably the chink in Chinese armor.
Shri, this perhaps just happens to be your lucky day because Wing Commander A.R. Giri is with us on this panel, and he's been very animatedly trying to respond to you. So without even asking him a question, in fact, your answer has put up a lot of questions already. Commander Giri, go ahead.
Yeah, let me start with saying, on a Global Times report about the J-31, are we really comparing a F-35 with a J-31?
Correct.
It is like comparing an orange with a banana which is yet to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
and that banana which is yet to grow, it has just come out. It's got 2 prototypes. If they have made any more, I still doubt. Capability-wise, yes, giving it a little farther range really doesn't make any difference because if you have a air-to-air refueling, that range part is already taken care of. If you actually see, it's got 2 engines. If you see its stealth part, what the Global Times claim, because the F-35 and the F-22 Raptor and Lightning are both known for their stealth. If the stealth part of the J-31 on papers is nothing much to write home about. It has got internal carriage of weapons, very limited, just 2,000 kgs and 4 hard points. That is why most of its hard points are outside. Now, it can carry 8,000 on papers, but they are outside. The moment you put a hard point outside, you've washed out all your stealth capability. There's nothing. The engines are not capable of supercruise. The engines are, by the way, being reverse engineered from the Su-35 engines from Russia. I think it's the AL-41 engine which is being reverse engineered as the WS-19. And they claim that they will have supercruise. They do not have supercruise. And as of now, other than the intake and the internal carriage of limited weapons, I don't see any stealth capability on this aeroplane. In any case, it's still on the drawing board. Let it come up. It takes time. Let that banana become ripe. Then we'll talk about how to eat it.
Right. And Ambassador Vora, if the Chinese want their fighter jets to fight, as sublimely as the F-35s, they perhaps need to have pilots such as Abhinandan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra, for another opportunity to be on your show with such a distinguished panel. Always a pleasure to be on a channel that uses a lamppost for illumination, not to lean on. And I'm glad that we don't have too much of noise. While the military experts will tell you all about it, which aircraft is better, Global Times don't take it seriously. And they've probably been trained in North Korea. I don't know if you've ever been to Pyongyang, but there's a Kim Il-sung Street located on Kim Il-sung Boulevard next to Kim Il-sung Hotel. You move out of there, there's a Kim Il-sung Street, there's a Kim Il-sung building, and it's not serious. Nobody takes them seriously anymore. May I just make a comment? You talked about stress. Well, the fellows of the Global Times may not be under stress, but the characters sitting in Beijing are certainly under enormous stress. Sir, please go back and read Prime Minister Lee Keqiang's speech at the 13th National Party Congress. It was in the last week of May. When the Prime Minister of the country, addressing party cadres, says you are corrupt, you are hedonistic, you are ineffective, you are lazy, it means something. When he tells the PLA that we need to strengthen your loyalty, that means something, sends a very powerful signal. And then he says we have to increase our agricultural production to be able to feed our own people. Then he says millions of, hundreds of millions, I beg your pardon, workers in China have flexible jobs, meaning informal sector, temporary jobs. Then he says their average per capita monthly income is $140, which is not enough, even enough to rent a room in a city. So what are we getting at? Here is this man saying everything that we all know is happening in China. If this is not a sign of an impending implosion, and now you can read how they are arresting anybody who says whatever. If anybody who dares to criticize or question, what is that fellow's name? The emperor who has no clothes?
Xi Jinping.
Yeah, that's right. Something like that. Now, when they start, when somebody questions that character, they get him arrested. And may I make just one last comment, sir, before my very, very distinguished other colleagues will respond. For 60 years, we've talked about, the world has talked about the Indo-Pak equation. I've been watching your television programs. We were in the same box as Pakistan. You'd get a couple of characters from Pakistan. They'd scream and yell. Our fellows would scream and yell. It was all India, Pakistan. And the Chinese were very happy that the attention was there. Now, all I'm seeing for the last 2 months is India, China, which is terrific because now China has come into the box with India and Pakistan has been relegated to the background. This is the inevitable march of folly. The Chinese present regime is acting against its own national interest, and whatever they want, they are doing the opposite. That's all that I have to say.
Sumit Peer, last but not the least, comparisons are being drawn between what the Chinese are planning to develop, and like Commander Giri also said, that it's a banana that's not even grown.
Right, Vineet, thank you very much for having me on the show. Let me base my argument on some facts and figures. Point number one is we need a basic universal fact. A copy can be never as good as the original. We all know. Laws of physics teaches that. So if you copy something...
But Sumit, imitation is flattery, right?
Yeah. If you copy something, it cannot be as good as the original. Point number two, Vineet, when you talk of these machines, this technology is not sold in supermarkets, neither it's available on Google. So whatever you come up and bring up, there are 2-3 things which happen, which, Girisa will bear me out. When you buy such high equipment, there is something called, every equipment has caveats. There are do's and do nots, there are case studies, and there are upgrades. The moment you copy it, you get rid of all of them. Point number 3 is, Vineet, which is very pertinent, is that, these Chinese are known for stealing you look at 2007, the Chinese hackers stole F-35, F-22 and MV-22 designs from Lockheed Martin. It's on, even the US intelligence has come from that. This is not what I'm alleging. Can we deny today F-15 is a copy, illegal copy of Su-33? Can we deny today Russians do not sell them the parts, they sell them the whole plane because they are worried about they will copy? Can we deny the fact when Russians sold them S-400, they did not sold them the most pertinent missile, which has the range of 400 kilometers? That is the heart of the system, because they were again wearing Chinese reverse engineer that. And the most pertinent point is here, Vineet, what I'm going to talk about now. You see, if you look at this F-35 whole thing, there is one thing we need is when you copy all this, you can, Global Times, you can come with a beautiful article and all. But one thing in this equipment is very, very important. The chinks in the Chinese armor, or the problem with the Chinese armor, is reliability. The moment you copy it, the reliability quotient goes for a toss. Because those clusters, those case studies, they're never done.
Product?
Yeah, they're never done. I'll tell you, you get a Chinese toy, the monkey will work for 5 days. But what will happen after 5 days? The duck will quack for 5 days. What will happen in the 6th day? I'll give you one more example, Vineet. The Chinese are talking F-35, sir. Is there a Chinese car which is sold in the world? Is there a Chinese motorcycle? Chinese cycle ki baat kare. Is there any Chinese microwave which is sold across the world? There is no product which, because people don't think them even worthy making a bicycle which can be sold across the world. Forget F-35s. You can have Global Times coming up with all kinds of stories in Alice in Wonderland. And you can write any spec, and it doesn't matter. You parade a machine and show this is what it can do. But where on this earth will get the reliability? And last but not the least point we need, man behind the machine makes all the difference. And MiG-21 gets down the F-16. We've seen it in Balakot. That's what the whole difference is.
That's the reason I spoke of Abhinandan,
You're absolutely right, Vinny. That's what all the difference is. We need a battle-hardened army. You cannot work on these jugards. I call them jugards. You can put a jugard together, paint, give it any funny name you want. But when it comes to war and warlike situations, these things, fall out like house of cards.
Absolutely. Professor Nalapat, your reaction, to a slew of comments that have come your way. Are the Chinese perhaps trying to get ahead of themselves by, if you can call it, propaganda of their might?
Well, Vineet, I can tell you that the Chinese propaganda is very effective. And it's effective not only in India, but also in the United States, where there seems to be a belief that the US is in trouble. No, it's not yet in trouble. And it will not be unless China overtakes the US in tech and in artificial intelligence. And the Chinese cannot do that unless India continues with its policy of all these years, 60, 70 years, basically, of at least the last 30 years, of opening India to Chinese tech. Today, I can tell you, now I'll give you a simple example. Our electrical systems. I can understand that you can't change Chinese electrical systems, switching gear and all that in a hurry. You'll probably take 5, 10 years to change it. But the computers in the system, even the computers are Chinese. Now, why is it that somebody in India has not at least changed the computers in the system so that they are no longer Chinese? I mean, what are we talking about? What kind of security consciousness do we have? In my opinion, zero. But today, with Prime Minister Modi's initiative, I hope that a security consciousness comes all down the line. And, and we have to ensure that there is a disconnect between their tech and our information. Because I can tell you, so long as the Chinese and the Pakistanis are allies like this, and so long as the Chinese are relying on Pakistani tacticians to plan operations concerning India, well, it's very, very clear that we have to ensure that Chinese tech is not allowed to dominate over alternative techs.
Okay, Shri, you wanted to come in. Let's hear from Shri what he wants to say.
Yes, a couple of things. All I was doing was merely quoting facts from this article that appeared in Aviation Week in 2018. And they said that there were 2 prototypes found. I guess things just kind of quietened down, and we don't know how many they have built now. Whatever it was, remember I asked the last question, what was the aircraft that was brought down? Was it an F-16 or a J-17? I mean, the whole idea of me asking that question was to find out the truth behind supposedly the knockoffs that China makes. I am no expert. I have not much information about avionics. I do know my encryption technology. And I know that US and perhaps Israel are probably the world leaders in this. And unless you know how to decrypt it, that is perhaps one of the weak spots, again, in the avionics, if you take a look at the big picture. Now, be that as it may, if China is even able to get something that appears to work 60% as functional as an F-35, that means they've made a lot of progress, guys. I mean, China was nothing but a manufacturing place. Even to get something, break it down to its components, and then put them back up, and the US are watching all the time, especially sensitive equipment, they would be able to track if something sensitive, for example, encryption technology. Today, I cannot even write a patent in encryption technology unless the US government tells me, yes, your patent can be written. And then also US says, I cannot share it outside of US. There are lots of restrictions to writing patents about encryption. That is how carefully US is monitoring it. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is that for China to have come this far, I think that is something that we should all take cognizance of. And whether it is right or wrong, we have to see how it performs in a battlefield, which is why I'm going back to my question. Was it an F-16 or was it a J-17?
Okay, let me from Commander Giri. Like you said, you're no expert, and that's why we have an expert on the panel who's going to put yours and my doubts to rest.
Okay, first of all, let me say that I will not get into the debate whether it was a F-16 or a J-17. It was an aeroplane, and that's good enough. It's been shot. That's good enough. And
Yes, stumps per chal rahi hai again. This is on your stumps. Don't let it go outside.
No, don't worry. That's absolutely fine. I've been dodging throughout my life from air combat. But as long as it's been taken down, that's fine. Because really, if you ask me, even I do not know what was it. Was it a J-17 or a F-16? but then both are as capable. Though the J-17 may not be a rip-off, the rip-off of a F-16 actually is what the Americans are now offering is the F-21. They are offering it in that terms. It was shown in the Aero India also very recently. But the point that I'm making right now is the Chinese propaganda seems to be getting to us a little too much. I mean, at the end of it, I mean, they still, if you want to build a 5th generation aeroplane, you need superior technology. I mean, some technologies like single large data bus interfaces. I mean, wherein the entire data from all the sensors are interfaced into one unit which processes, because the sensors are all over. In fact, in a stealth aeroplane, the entire skin is a sensor. So all these kind of technology for China to have come up without the entire world knowing, well, they must have really pulled off a rabbit from a hat. Then I give it to them. But without the entire world knowing, I would not accept. I will keep my doubts about it. And without this kind of technology, even I think some people in the US still consider this. I will put it, the J-31 at a maximum of 4.5 generation. 5th, definitely not. 4th to 4.5.
Right, Ambassador Vora, can China really be, relying on these rip-offs that, they've been trying to, in fact, emulate from the Americans? Because, they plan to be the most powerful nation in the world. And considering the impediments that they have, come across very recently, number one being the pandemic, and number two, the international rebuke that they have received because of their certain laws and their tendencies. Do you think that China will be really focused on once again rekindling its romance with technology while US has a presence in the South China Sea?
If we are talking about the government of China, or if we are talking about the Chinese people, there is a distinction between the two. The whole government of China is a rip-off. It's the term that you have used. The whole government is a rip-off.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Do they have one?
Sir?
I wanted to ask, do they have one?
Supposedly.
Well, all right. The reality here, sir, is that on borrowed technology, you cannot survive for very long. As Professor Nanabhat pointed out very accurately, that this propaganda business that some of us seem to swallow hook, line, and sinker, this is all nonsense. Sun Tzu talked about winning a war without fighting a bullet or fighting at all. I mean, that kind of rubbish nobody believes anymore. So, uska dada hamare desh mein tha, a fellow called Chanakya, who said, agar dushman aa raha hai, aapko dar lage, pehle dar ko pito, fir jaake dushman ko pito. And we are their grandfathers when it comes to strategy. But the Chinese all along have attempted to tell the world, while the world was in a stupor, seduced by the promise of the Chinese market, that let them do anything. We have cheap labor, we have this, we have that. Now we are coming to a time, and I would be very happy if you could correct me on this, where probably 50% of manufacturing, at least in the Western countries, United States and Canada, is based on artificial intelligence, on robotics. So when a time comes that a robot makes the car parts and then assembles the car, it'll probably be cheaper to make a car in the United States than in China. So the advantage of cheap labor goes away. What is left, sir? What is that which has emerged from China that is indigenous to China? Everything is copied. Everything is a rip-off. And a nation that survives on ripping off others will soon find that it has no clothes. I think the Emperor of China has found that out right now.
Absolutely. And folks, on that noble note, we're going to slip it. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned.
Go buy some clothes.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.